Hey everybody, welcome to the joint webinar between Cloudian, FileCatalyst, and Axle. This is Chris Bailey from FileCatalyst, and it's a case study on how to set up a simple, cost-effective remote video workflow. So today, the panelists are David Phillips, Principal Architect for M&E at Cloudian.
Hey everybody.
Myself, I'm Chris Bailey, CEO of FileCatalyst. We also have Sam Bogosh on the line. He's the CEO at Axle, and his colleague Patrice Gutebel, VP of Product Management at Axle. I'll hand it over to David Phillips now, and he can tell you a little bit about Cloudian.
Thanks, Chris. So at Cloudian, we have a software-defined object storage platform called Hyperstore. So this is designed to be a scalable storage platform for your content library, for all of your media assets. So, this is on-prem in your data center. You can utilize as a native S3 API. So you can really think of it as AWS S3 storage service, but on-prem in your data center. Well, why would you choose, to deploy your own private cloud, object storage private cloud? Customers typically are looking to deploy Cloudian, number one, for cost. It's more cost effective over a long term than, consuming, on a monthly and an annual basis, petabyte levels of public cloud service. The other thing, that really for media companies that have legacy archives, media archives, content libraries, is that it provides them a private S3 URL, a storage domain that it never changes. As you grow the system, as you scale and add nodes, your storage domain, your URL, s3.mystoragedomain.com never changes. When you put that, put a global server load balancer behind that, you essentially have all of the high availability and resiliency that the public cloud services provide, because you're routing around failures as disks go offline, nodes go offline, or network segments go offline. The system, using a clustered database design, just routes around the failure to the next available node, the next available instance of the data. So for storage admins, this means that they don't have to manage multiple storage silos that you would typically accumulate with block and file storage, where you have data management issues. Where's my file? Where did I put that file? And then you have more than, with Cloudian, you essentially have a single pane of glass for your scalable storage cluster. Next slide. So how this fits in with our partners here is that when you integrate an asset management platform like Axle, where it provides Elasticsearch, I can browse and search across my content libraries. I can look at thumbnails and video proxies, metadata listings, so I can find all of my assets. So I now have a scalable domain to store all of my assets. I have a web interface to find and search and get access to my assets. And then underneath all of that, FileCatalyst allows a high-speed, file acceleration framework for extending all of these assets and all of this, asset management out to my remote workers who are editors in the field, or graphics artists who are contractors or third parties, or working from home, visual effects artists, or sound effects or music composers. So everybody can have a central media workflow hub, and because they're using and accessing high-res material, they need a file acceleration to pull down large files, contribute. They're out in the field shooting, 4K footage. They can quickly get it back to the central Cloudian cluster for long-term data preservation and further collaboration with their remote teams and colleagues. So I'll hand it back over to you, Chris.
Yeah, so just a brief introduction for anybody that isn't aware of what FileCatalyst does. So we're file transfer acceleration. We move files faster than traditional methods. So it's a patented UDP approach. And basically it allows any third-party systems or standalone workflows to ingest files, distribute files, move files around within workflows, and send email links to end users, etc. So we provide all the tools and SDKs that allow it to be integrated into systems like Cloudian, Axle, through our SDK. And we also provide a large suite of management tools to monitor your global deployment, check on the health of your network, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. So some of the high-level features, speeds up to 10 gigabits, and that's, again, regardless of geographic location. So as you get further away from a central office and you're working with global teams, you're going to get the same speeds as you would if you were close, as long as the bandwidth is available, whereas with FTP or HTTP-based uploaders, you're not going to see that. You're going to have local servers that you upload and then have them like a CDN type approach, which is a lot more costly. One of the things that we have as well is the checkpoint restart. So obviously, regardless of your network, you're going to have some sort of interruption sometimes, and it's painful to restart and retransfer hours and hours and waste that time. So obviously, we have the ability to pick up and retransfer starting where we left off, fully encrypted. The way it's deployed, there's watch folders for automation, web browser integration. That's one of the things that you'll see today in the demo. Obviously, we're integrated with leading broadcast solutions as well. So we add that transport to broadcast workflow MAM solutions like Axle. And then on the back end, we have to put the files, send the files from somewhere to somewhere. And that's where connecting to leading cloud storage providers, whether it be on-premise like Cloudian Hyperstore or cloud-based storage, public cloud like AWS, S3, et cetera. We do those as well. Next slide. And just a quick overview of how it's deployed. You can see there in the middle is the FileCatalyst server with the cloud attached storage, and then the several client applications on the left-hand side there, watch folders, desktop, browser, mobile. So we provide all those standalone tools that can be used in addition to the SDK, which is how we plug into an application like Axle, and then the storage side where the FileCatalyst server is connected, that's where we plug into cloud storage providers like Cloudian. Okay, and I'll turn it over to Sam now, or Patrice from Axle.
Thanks much, Chris. Appreciate it. So yeah, I'll do just a brief intro, and then Patrice will be getting into the nitty gritty. For those who don't know Axle, we've been around nearly 8 years now, and we were founded on this idea of radically simple search and management of your content. Because our software works in a browser, a really important use of it today especially is remote access, where people can log in and basically see their footage from anywhere using H.264 proxies, and our software handles all that in the background. We do this for about 9 different kind of vertical sectors, if you will, everything from sports teams through creative agencies, broadcasters, political campaigns, although there's not a whole lot of political campaigning going on at the moment, and things like documentary makers. So it's a very diverse group of customers. And what we find is that regardless of whether it's big names like the ones on the slide, who've been some of our best customers, or less well-known teams, that the workflows are usually quite similar. People have a mix of different editing workstations, maybe Premiere, some Final Cut, some Avid. They're typically migrating up from more of a sneaker net approach where they've had individual hard drives or maybe a local network. They want to get to where they can access their media from anywhere. And then things like searchability through AI, so the ability to do transcripting, face recognition, even things like sports highlights automatically are a real breakthrough when you have hundreds of terabytes or even petabytes of content. So we're really thrilled to be partnering here with both Cloudian and FileCatalyst. And to give you an idea like how our stuff works, there's kind of a modular layer where you can plug in different AI engines. There's also the front end, which Patrice will be showing you in a second. You can see it here on an iPad. We have a framework called Connector for building custom workflows. That's kind of visual diagramming environment. And then kind of our ace in the hole is that we don't require any change to your storage setup. So you literally point Axle at the storage that you have. It has a particularly nice interface with Cloudian, but in principle, it works with almost any storage. And so you can use Axle without having to kind of rip up and restart your existing ways of working. So with that, I will hand it over to Patrice, who will be demoing the combination of the products.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome everybody. We are very excited to have you here with us. And let me just exit this slide here. And so how is Axel working? You access Axel from the web browser. And today we want to actually focus on the new working environment that we have today, which is the need to access remotely the content that exists in my high-speed storage in the office, and how do I transfer these files back and forth. And all of that securely, and all of that remotely from my home. So let's take the situation where I am a video editor, and I will need to access whatever exists on the Cloudian storage back in the production house, which I cannot access at the moment, or I elected to work remotely. So Axel is software that sits on top of the Cloudian storage in this instance. It is going to monitor and index the content of the storage and replicate it. The way a user would typically access Axel would be from the web browser. And that is true whether you're remote or we are local in the same network. That way you do not have any software to upgrade or support. It's only the server side. And if I were, like I said, I'm working from home, so we can use a reverse proxy setup that will allow me to access the Axel server basically from home via my web browser with a simple URL, in this instance, cloudian.axel.ai. And I have the login page, and that does not expose the server nor the Cloudian server outside of the firewall. Everything is still behind the firewall. We have just an in-between server that is going to query the server privately and securely. And once I will log in, I will access the content that I am authorized to see. So on the left side, see here, you will have the folder tree, and that is exactly what exists on the Cloudian storage. And I can actually show you that briefly with the FileCatalyst interface. If you allow me to switch briefly here to the FileCatalyst, I'm using the web browser version here of the transfer agent, and I will do a manual transfer. There are many other ways, as Chris mentioned earlier, to perform a transfer. You can have watch folders, you can use the workflow automation tools that will allow you to send back and forth files. And here you will see that I have the folder Axel AI tests, the CD, sound effects, and so on. The same folder going back to the Axel here that I have in my Cloudian storage right here. And so I can just go in and let's just say I'm going to take let's take these two clips right here, but let's keep it short, and I'm going to move them inside the Axel test folder. And by doing so, it will send the files over to the Axel AI test right here. Here we go. We'll send it over, and again, it will be fast, accelerated, and that's a good way for me to send whatever I have on my computer. So if I have high-res finishes or renders, or if I have new shots that I have taken remotely, I can send them, and they're going to land directly onto my storage. Going to the Axel test folder, you will see that I have one file, and I will have these two new files that are going to show up when the transfer is done. And we are not going to we are going to wait a little bit. The transfer is completing, and then we are going to go back and check it out later on. But I can easily browse and see the content of my folders. And each new folders or each new file that Axel is going to pick, it's going to reflect it, and it's going to render a preview. And we even have some scrubbing of the thumbnail, so I can easily know if it is the file that is important to me. More importantly, I can perform searches. So if I search, for example, on Bill Gates, I will find the file that I need, and I can confirm it is the file that I want. And from there, I can do different things. I can download the files, although if I am in a real rush and I need a little bit of speed, I will again use whatever I have here to bring the file over. Now you notice that the transfer is done, and if I check right here, we wait a little bit, they're going to be picked up, and we are going to start to render the preview. So moving on to the search, I have a quick search. I can also do an advanced search when I can search on specific metadata tags or name or comments, and I can add more than one criteria, including, for example, modification date, less than, let's say, May 1st. And I do the name, contains, so I should probably do May 21st because everything has been added. May 21st, and then contains gates. Let's do just this quick search right here. And I will again find the same clip right here, May 20th, Bill Gates. I can go in. Now, when I click on a preview, I will access the file. And you will see it's a 1 hour long file, so you just need to wait for the buffer. It's going to load the preview. And here is the lowest preview that I actually create, HTML5 player. We can scrub through the video. You can play the video. You can post comments on the timeline. This would become searchable. So I will say, for example, Bill Gates arrived right here, mark in, mark out. Bill Gates arrived, and now I have a new marker that appears. This will become searchable. Or on the right side, I have the possibility to create my own metadata schema that I would just go in and enter in feeds. And it can be drop-down menu, it can be dates, it can be keywords, and all of that would become searchable. And with that, that was a quick overview of Axel. The level of access that you will have will be handled by the administration, where when I will go in, I will be able to create different users with different level of access. So I can just go in and say, this test user will only access the project share. I can even go deeper. Let me remove the project share and add a subfolder within the project share. It can only access graphics, and I can choose the level of permission that it has. We save. Speaking of which, so you have here kind of the B-roll, whatever I receive, and you can have another share, so you can have as many shares as you want, all in Cloudian or other drive, but preferably Cloudian. And I can just see the content and filter down, let's say, only videos. Let's go to the whole project share actually and find the videos, and I will see the different video clips that I have for the lower third, for example, with the Cloudian logo. I need these files. I can download whether I do the original or the proxies. And then I can start to edit. And that was a quick overview of Axel. Briefly, I will mention that we have also another automation tool called Connector, which will allow you to either copy files around. You can also move them to hot folder for FileCatalyst. You can render files, and we just come out also with the possibility, again, with the remote work idea, I can create editing proxies right here for example, Premiere Pro, where I will create whatever format I need or the bit rate I would want. So 2 megabit, for example, 720p. Let me zoom in so we can all see. 720p is 2 megabit per second. And I'm going through a watch folder. And based on the criteria, I'm simply going to render with audio pass-through the footage at 2 megabit per second, 720p, which will be less for me to download and edit. I can even use Premiere Pro to toggle between proxies and not if I have VPN access directly into the cloud and storage. And if you do not have this, you can again use FileCatalyst to see the folders, or whenever it is ready, you transfer automatically down to you. And with that, I'm going to pause a second and see if we have any questions.
And do feel free, everyone, to use the question section. Right, we're happy to answer anything that comes up, and we've intentionally kind of kept the programmatic part of this short and sweet, so that we can go in whatever direction the audience is most interested.
Okay, so we do have one question that came in, and it's predictable. How has the pandemic affected demand for your products? And I guess that one's directed to all of us. So I can start since I'm already talking. What we've seen from FileCatalyst is actually an increase in demand. Obviously, in terms of people we were speaking to previously, there is a little bit of a shock factor when lockdowns and restrictions were implemented. However, concurrently with that, teams becoming remote created a surge in need for remote file transfer. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, for FileCatalyst, we're able to maintain high-speed transfers, especially when bandwidth is available. And as people have been shifted out of their offices to remote workspaces to their homes dispersed throughout North America or Europe or around the world, there was a need for them to upgrade their bandwidth, and then a need to maximize that bandwidth to keep them moving files efficiently between themselves and their colleagues. And so for FileCatalyst, it's actually been a bit of a surge. And some industries a little bit of a lull now, but hopefully they'll come back. But certainly we've seen an uptick in interest in file transfer acceleration. David, maybe on the Cloudian side.
Yeah, totally. I think what we've seen is that, now that you have remote teams who are forced to work, from home, who are used to accessing all of their infrastructure back in the home office, the HQ, all the traditional storage devices like block and file stores that they rely on for collaboration and content creation are now no longer optimal for accessing at a distance. So, typical scenario would be you would kind of have a corporate VPN connection, and you would try to kind of access your storage, mount your file servers over a VPN. Well, what we're finding is that a lot of companies, the VPN was not designed for everybody to be working remotely, just select teams. And so once you have all this kind of bandwidth contention and congestion on the VPN, it makes accessing those file services that much more reliable. You get drop connections. If you have a file open, you can experience corruption, things like that. So we get a lot of customers coming to us asking us about Cloudian private cloud storage because it's inherently designed to be accessed over a wide area network. It's HTTPS, S3 API, so it's designed to be resilient for those high latency connections. And it's when you combine it with solutions like FileCatalyst and Axle, where I can see all of my content and I can do a transfer of my content if I'm downloading proxies for a project. And then, or if I'm done with my proxy edit, I want to conform to my high res, having a platform, a storage platform, and a way to kind of search and transfer those assets, at distance remotely, is what we're seeing a lot of kind of uptick in our market. Sam?
Yep.
What are you seeing out there?
Yep. So I would, we've kind of had a different experience like immediately and then longer term. So I would say March and part of April people were kind of just freaking out. So
yeah.
I don't think any of us saw like a whole, there was just a period where everyone was like, what the heck just happened? And then towards the end of April and just in the last couple of weeks, particularly in Europe, we are like busier than we've ever been because I think Europe came back online probably a month or so ahead of the US. So I was just talking to our head of European operations, and it's ridiculous how many projects he's suddenly getting bombarded with because everyone wants remote access. They want to develop these new distributed workflows. So I guess, and we're seeing some of that in North America, but it'll probably take the next few weeks to really kick in. Overall, I think it's clear there's a strong trend in the direction of these kinds of tools and away from legacy tools like SneakerNet or just having a SAN where everyone has to connect directly to the device. The value of those things is obviously a lot lower if people don't know from month to month, let's say, what their working arrangements are going to be. And there's also this just longer term structural issue that having experienced work from home and not having to commute every day or travel, a lot of people are kind of liking it. And they're like, I could keep doing this, and it would, and then they're asking their employers, like, make it make it possible for me to do that. So essentially, even once COVID I think dissipates as an immediate threat, which we all hope will happen, I think some of these changes are structural and permanent.
Yeah.
We've got a few more questions here too. We can try and, I think we might have touched on some of these. So one of them here for FileCatalyst, how does it offer an advantage over HTTP and other, traditional transfers? So it's complicated a little bit. Obviously, HTTP offers firewall transparency. It has some advantages like that, but it's a compromise between speed and, I guess, firewall friendliness with our software. Obviously, we also offer HTTP as a fallback, but where FileCatalyst really comes into play is when you have high bandwidth and any sort of latency on your link. So you do have teams that are across the country, and as bandwidth becomes less expensive, and obviously people are upgrading their home bandwidth now to get gigabit or higher in their homes, that's when HTTP is just not going to get you full speed. There's cases where it will. Let's say you have hundreds of files to transfer and you need to transfer very high concurrency, you're going to get probably full speed with HTTP. But if you're working remotely, you're working on a file, you need to get that video across, and it's not hundreds of files, it's one or two, that's where using UDP can get you that full speed without having to resort to sending a lot of files at one time. So that's where we offer the advantage, and obviously we've built it in such a way that it can be plugged in and as easy to use as possible as it can be, so you don't have a large uptick in what the steps you have to take to get up and running. But yeah, that's pretty much the advantages of FileCatalyst over HTTP. Just to be quick here, because we're coming up on a half an hour. Cloudian, we have a similar question actually. How does Cloudian actually offer an advantage to other storage that, say Axel would be connected to a local, just a traditional storage? What advantage is there to connecting it to Cloudian?
Yeah, and I think, the key thing there when you talk about like object storage versus traditional kind of SAN and NAS storage is that inherently object storage is designed around data protection, data availability, high availability, architecture of using redundant nodes, and spreading data across, the nodes in the storage cluster. So you're inherently, when you write data to object storage platform like Cloudian, you're inherently getting that, data protection that comes from making multiple copies or, breaking that large file into fragments and then distributing those multiple fragments across the storage cluster. So I think that the key, is that what we're seeing is the market or the traditional workflow of, I have a remote team, they're out in the field, they're shooting footage, and they need to back that up, for kind of permanent long-term preservation. Typically, they would bring a hard drive or the camera cards back to the office, and then they would copy that to the SAN or the NAS, and then that would get backed up to the LTO tape or something like that. What we're seeing now, and especially, just in general in the industry, but also especially now with the current kind of, data centers are closed and people working remotely, is that all that workflow is kind of tipped on its head in a way. And you have a remote team in the field, they need to get their clips back to HQ as fast as possible so they can be backed up and secure. They've spent time and money on kind of going to a remote location for either news or, kind of entertainment shooting. They need to get that valuable footage back and backed up. And so using something like a FileCatalyst, agent on their laptop in the field, where they can optimize getting high-res footage back to their Cloudian cluster, which there it can essentially, that can be its forever home, because they're inherently backing it up to the archive first. Then asset management platforms like Axel can kind of pick it up, make proxies, and then the other stages of the workflow can take place. But what we're seeing is that the traditional workflow of copy it to your tier 1 storage, then back that up, is kind of flipping around, because I need to kind of protect. I need to collaborate, but I also need to protect this footage and get it backed up as quickly as possible. So it's kind of going cloud first instead of like cloud, be it tape or kind of object storage as an archive target at the end of the workflow. It's kind of coming up to the beginning of the workflow.
Thanks, David. At that, I think as a final parting, if anybody wants to get information on any of the respective products or the combined solution, you can feel free to reach out to any of us, FileCatalyst, Cloudian, or Axle. Each of our websites they have trial forms and submission forms where you can get in touch with us. Other than that, thank you for attending, and hope everybody's staying safe in this troubled times, and hopefully we get back to as much of a normal as possible. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.